Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. This reading week covers the last days of January and the first days of February. I'm going to start with the last days of January, so I will be moving the poetry that I've been reading the first days of February over here so I can talk about the books from the last days of January. Starting with King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. I reread King Solomon's Mines for Haggard in January, a booktube event created by Randy Ray. King Solomon's Mines is an adventure novel. It is the founder novel of the Lost World genre of adventure fiction. It's about a big game hunter and trader named Alan Quatermain, who, during a boat trip from Cape Town to Durban, South Africa, he meets on ship Sir Henry Curtis, an English aristocrat, and his traveling companion, Captain Good. Sir Henry has come to South Africa looking for his missing brother, George, who years ago, after a titanic argument, left to make his fortune in South Africa. Alan Quatermain is the last person known to have seen George Curtis alive. And so during their conversation, Quatermain says that Curtis, the younger, George, was going to the north of South Africa to look for a legendary diamond mine. And this puts Quatermain in mind of an encounter he had decades earlier where a Portuguese adventurer came to that part of South Africa looking for evidence of his ancestors' adventures in this legendary area. So apparently, in the setting of this novel, there's in the north of South Africa a smallish desert. It's a few hundred miles wide, bordered on the north by some mountains. And over those mountains is an uncontacted territory where millennia ago King Solomon allegedly had diamond mines or gold mines or both. And so Quatermain has inherited the map and the story of this place, and he believes that George took his directions to go find it, although he has not been seen for 2 years or more. So Sir Henry asked Quatermain to organize and participate in an expedition to go look for George. Quatermain eventually agrees, and as he sets about setting up this expedition, a young Zulu warrior named Umbopa comes to ask to join this expedition. Although it's very clear that there's more to him than meets the eye, and that he's wanting to join this expedition for his own purposes. So the expedition sets out. There's an interlude for some elephant hunting. Then they get to the main meat of the expedition, crossing this desert, and then the mountains, and then their adventures on the other side of the mountain, which is land that is very fertile, very beautiful, that is currently occupied by a people based on the Zulus called the Kukawanas, who have made this area their home for several centuries. In order to survive amongst the Kukawana, Quatermain and company pretend to be traveling wizards from a different planet. And they use their advanced technology and some smarts to sort of stave off. Are you really the questions like, are you really magicians? And so they encounter the king of the Kukuwanas, who's a tyrant. And luckily for them, it's at this point that Umbapa reveals that he is actually Ignosi, a Kukuwana prince whose father was overthrown by his uncle Twala. And there's a civil war. Ignosi wins and becomes king. And then Quartermain and company get to see the diamonds before being betrayed by the witch Gaggle, who may or may not be a few hundred years old. And then they eventually find George as they leave. So I have a very complicated reading relationship with this novel. When I first read this novel when I was 14, I really enjoyed it. Along with She and Alan Quartermain, the sequel to King Solomon's Mines. But over the years since then, particularly the last 10 or so years, I've come back to King Solomon's Mines, and that same magic, that same feeling for the novel just isn't there. I don't enjoy rereading it. I guess the problem is that as a younger reader, as a new reader, you don't quite catch as much when you experience things for the first time. But when you come back to it, or when you've read more widely, better written books, better examples of books in the genre, you kind of start to notice some of the flaws in the novel. And I think that was what has been bugging me with this reread. For one thing, I'm not too fond of the conceit that this is a work of nonfiction. Because I get the sense that, is this really what an expedition memoir would read like? I also noticed on this reread that, in a way, this whole novel is a bit of a betrayal of Umbapa, isn't it? Because at the end of the novel, Umbapa declares Kukuwana land closed, that nobody else from the outside is going to be welcomed here. And Quartermain basically just tells everybody how to get there, because he includes the map. Now, it's the most difficult map, but it's also mentioned that there's a different way from the south, which is how Umbapa got to, or Ignosi got to, the rest of South Africa, or what would become South Africa. But the north of Kukuwana land is a bit more open. And I've read somewhere that Kukuwana land would have been in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So, do we necessarily want King Leopold to know where Kukuwana land is? So that kind of bugged me. That realization really bugged me. And then it's very clear that Ignosi is likely from this land, that he's not joining this expedition for work. He's joining this expedition to go home. And it takes Quartermain a ridiculously long amount of time, basically Ignosi telling him that Quartermain gets it. And if Quartermain had realized it earlier, he would have said, oh, wait a minute, Umbapa, is there a better way to get here? Another issue I had is that the tension, the cliffhangers I don't know if they're necessarily placed all that well within the chapters. That it's kind of there's an unevenness to it. So I have to say I really did not enjoy this reread of King Solomon's Mines. Although at least I finished it, which is more than I can say for the next two books. First up is Rocannon's World by Ursula K. LeGuin. So this is another BookTube event. This time a multi-month event. A number of booktubers, led by Gareth of Book Songs and Other Magic, are reading the Hainish cycle stories of Ursula K. Le Guin, starting with Rocannon's World, Ursula K. Le Guin's first novel. So Rocannon's World is a science fiction novel told as if it was a heroic fantasy. So the prologue, or the seed short story, is set on a planet with several sentient species, one of whom serve as the standard fantasy human species. They are in a Bronze Age feudal culture. There are two other species who serve the roles of elves and dwarves. The dwarves are the most technologically advanced and have been contacted by an interstellar polity of other humanoid species called the League of All Worlds, of which Earth is, at certain points, a member of. So, this interstellar polity, who are called Star Lords amongst the various peoples of this world, have begun to interfere. And the short story is about a princess looking for a missing family jewel, which is in a museum on another planet. The bulk of the story takes place about a century later and features her great-grandson as a companion to an anthropologist who was at the museum when she came to collect her jewel. At this point, this planet had been uncontacted for decades because reasons. And a rebel member of this League of All Worlds has set up a base, although nobody knows about it, until they shoot down a survey ship that the main character Rocannon is on, who's leading an expedition to recontact the peoples of this world. Although apparently he did not do a very good job of managing things. But anyway, so the bulk of the story is Rocannon traveling across this world to find this rebel base so he can send a signal to his superiors for them to destroy it. And it's told again as if it were an epic, or as a heroic fantasy. And I hated it. The writing is just really bad. I know it's a first novel, but it's bad. The world, well, I think if maybe the conceit wouldn't have been so bad if somebody else's perspective was the focus. Say a native of this planet was all like the great grandson. If it was his perspective, then I can understand this story being told as a heroic fantasy, or even if this were a document from centuries in the future, retelling this story. I could get that. But the main point of view is Rocannon, so it shouldn't work that way. Also, one thing that really bugged me and is a recurrent annoyance of mine when it comes to science fiction is that for all of the scientific and technological innovations that take place, that are imagined by the author, they really do a shit job with the cultural world building. And that kind of comes into here, where I really don't buy that Rocannon is an anthropologist, that he's any good at his job. He's biased. He has decided favoritism for this one culture, the humans, and the heroic fantasy setup. And he's pretty outright racist towards the dwarves, who are basically, telling him something, and he's just letting his racism blind him to it, which, maybe that's kind of the point, I don't know, but still, it's annoying and off-putting. So it's just, I really did not like this. Now, I know I've read that this and the next novel, at least, are LeGuin trying to find her footing as a science fiction writer. But I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but to be honest, I've read quite a bit of LeGuin. I've read From Here, The Word for World is Forest, and it was just okay. I really don't like The Dispossessed. I tried The Left Hand of Darkness and The Wizard of Earthsea and pretty much bailed almost immediately. I gave Rocannon's World a little bit more time, but the same result. So I think ultimately LeGuin is just not a writer for me. I don't see the appeal of her, or she's not effective for me. But I am going to continue on and see if maybe things will improve, or maybe if I ever get around to doing a proper purge of my science fiction and fantasy collection, well, LeGuin is going to be on the bye-bye pile. I also ended up bailing on After 1177 BC by Eric H. Cline. This is a history of the ancient Near East in the aftermath of the Bronze Age collapse and how civilization restarted or was reborn. I did not get on with the writing at all. It just... I think where I am right now, I'm probably not overly interested in history. So I don't know necessarily if I will be trying to participate in future quarters of Historathon and other nonfiction events or what. But I just did not get on with this work of history at all. So now on to the poetry. So from February 1st through yesterday, February 5th, I read quite a bit of poetry. And I loved it. I was feeling pretty down Saturday when I did not get on with King Solomon's Mines and then Rocannon's World and 1177, after 1177. So I was feeling pretty down. But Radioactive Starlings and Aurora Americana by Myronn both really picked me up. I really loved rereading both of these collections, particularly Aurora Americana, which really rose in my estimation on this reread. I was really bowled over by it, but I really love Myronn work. And then from Monday through Thursday, I reread all of Evie Shockley that I have, starting with A Half-Read Sea, which is brilliant. The New Black, which was a great reread. Semiautomatic, great. And Suddenly We, which is wonderful. So I had a blast rereading all 4 of these volumes, even on days where life was really rough. And I was on the verge of a meltdown. And normally, when this happens, it is incredibly difficult for me to read or to continue on with whatever reading plans I had. But it did not happen this time. This time I persevered, and these collections of poetry really, really saw me through those rough days. So it was a great amount of fun. Now, Suddenly I read yesterday morning because my mom had a doctor's appointment, so I took this along and read it on the way home. Or read it at the clinic and then on the way home. Or finished it off on the bus on the way home. And then when I got home, I reread Brief Homage to Pluto by Fabio Pusturla, translated from the Italian by Schutt. This is a wonderful collection of poems by Fabio Pusturla. I really, really enjoyed rereading these poems, especially as later on Thursday there were some rough moments as well. So it was a blast. It was a blast. So what will I be reading this coming reading week? So today and tomorrow, so Friday afternoon and Saturday, I will be reading the February manga releases that I collected, that I hauled a few days ago. And I will film a separate wrap-up video of them on Monday. Hopefully things work out. Last month, I had a disappointing reread of Fairy Tale, and then the new releases from last December didn't quite work out for me either, so I'm hoping things improve, but I will report back on Monday. And then on Sunday, I'm going to be reading Fences by August Wilson as part of Angelia of Read and Rereads Endless Drama Project. And over the course of the work week, I will be starting on Runaway Horses by Yukio Mishima, translated from the Japanese by Michael Gallagher. And this is part of a booktube project with a number of booktubers, including Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads and Alan of Big Heart Books and Classics, that I'm looking forward to. I loved Spring Snow, so I'm really looking forward to Runaway Horses. And then I'm pretty sure I probably won't finish Runaway Horses until either at the very end of this reading period or going into the next one. So I'm not going to plan for anything else. So yeah. Anyway, so that's my reading plan for next week. As far as BookTube is concerned, I am continuing my 2026 library tour. So the next episode will be up on Monday. It will be the second part of the top of the bookcase I have my science fiction and fantasy collection on. Saturday and Sunday, I will film a few more episodes of that, and then into Monday, and then I'll parcel them out one video a day, like I have been doing. And then once I finish the science fiction part of the tour, I'm going to be moving over into the manga part of the tour. Um, Other videos I'm hoping to make a few tag videos. I have been remiss in making tag videos. Of course, there will be weekly Poetry Thursday, which will probably be Myronn Hardy, and of course, weekly reads next Friday. So, anyway, BookTube, until I see you next weekend or next week, thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon and have a great weekend.